Hey everybody,
Perfect.
it's Friday, May the 24th, 2024. It's both of those things. And this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey, my friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, and often cool friends, who you'll find out about in just a second, talk about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. This week, we are joined by our friend and colleague, Kyle, who is director of a Wesley Foundation, doing some truly amazing things. And so I'll throw to Kyle now to introduce himself and to introduce his ministry.
Awesome. Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Emily. Excited to be here. Like Trey said, I'm the pastor of the Lamar Wesley Foundation over at Lamar University in Beaumont. And so what that means is I run a student center there in the heart of campus where we meet the needs of students. We build community. We try to help students sort of find a home while they're there on campus, try to deepen their faith. And for a lot of folks, as we're going to talk about in just a little bit, explore all sorts of faith questions, whether or not they have any faith at all. And so it's a truly unique and amazing sort of ministry that we're doing there.
And so, yeah, a couple of weeks ago on the show, we talked about this kind of new frontier of campus ministry, that campus ministry is shifting. And I introed this show with, I was inspired to have that conversation by a conversation you, Kyle, and I had in a bar, specifically Pint and Barrel back in whatever that was, February or March, hearing about what campus ministry looks like for you now versus kind of the standard model, right? We talked about in the previous show, the standard model is campus ministry is youth group 2.0, right? That it is to hopefully smooth over a gap, that you don't go from youth group and then don't go to church for 4 years. It is you go from youth group to a campus ministry to then hopefully, going to church after you graduate. That it is this like gap filling space. It's also one of the like main recruitment places for clergy, right? Like it's a lot of us come out of, me included, come out of campus ministries. That is different now as overall trends in religiosity change, thus campus ministry changes. So I want you to talk about like the makeup of your campus ministry, and essentially what makes it so special.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is absolutely huge. I myself also part of a campus ministry when I was in college, and I went in thinking, I'm just going to copy and paste what I experienced here on campus now. And I realized very quickly that just wasn't the case. I say roughly to folks that of our main group of folks that come by and that call Wesley their home, maybe 10% of them are Methodists in any way, whether they grew up going to a Methodist church, whether they even know what UMC means. And then we have a bunch of other folks who are raised Baptist or non-denominational or everything in between. But then we also have, I think, a very interesting group here right now where we have a lot of people who are not sure. They are used to be in the church for a long time and now are like, I don't really know. We have folks who were, raised / forced to go to church as a kid, and that did harm to them. And so now they can't call themselves a Christian, even if they have sort of ideas of a God and sort of bigger than us divine. But it's all people looking for community and trying to find what that is for the first time away from home for a lot of these folks. This is really, outside of the bubble that a lot of people grew up in, meeting new people from different places, getting to see different expressions of faith. And so it's a very much not a, youth group 2.0 because there was not a youth group 1.0 for a lot of folks. Or, it's just something different entirely. So,
and so I that's amazing, right? And why we have you on the show is because I think that's amazing. And not only do I think it's amazing, I think it is an interesting story to tell about the future of the church, right? That the generation that is in a Wesley Foundation now, do the math, are already emerging into the adult world. And that's only going to accelerate, right? Like, we can no longer, maybe, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, Emily and I used to have to explain what a Gen Z was, which was funny. But at this point, we can't even think of Gen Zs as kids. We can't even think of Gen Zs as kids these days. I deeply dislike the phrase college kids because they're not, they're literally by definition not children. You have to be, generally speaking, a legal adult or shockingly close to being a legal adult to go to college. Like my wife started college at 17. I started college at 19, right? Like I was in no way a child by the time I got to a college campus. So anyways, this is coming up with the protests around the war in Gaza of like these college kids. And I'm like, well, first of all, they're adults. And this is part of the problem is you're calling them children. But so if we realize that like Gen Z are not kids these days. They are young adults and emerging professionals and folks that like, even if we have this concept of church, that it's really about adults that are moving into the adult phase of life, then that's Gen Z at this point, right? Millennials are, as Emily will remind me, shockingly approaching middle age. I am told often that I am pushing 40, specifically 40. On this show. Pushing 40, Trey. It's, I have a
Millennials are old. We are old now.
I'm about to enter the phase of the year where, unfortunately, Emily and I are the same age, where we are both going to be 38. But I'll just remind her that she's far closer to being 39 than I am. But like we're approaching middle age, and we are. I've reflected on this show before of like the people my own age like wrestling with the temporal nature of life and the approaching death, and I'm like, y'all are 40, chill out. But anyway, so I think what is happening in your Wesley Foundation is not just awesome, and it is awesome, but I think it's also predictive of a version of what the church can and probably should look like, given we're entering into a world where we cannot assume that people grew up in church. And so we can't be assumed like, when the young families realize they need to come back to church, those young families may have never been to a church. And so what I'm really curious, obviously we want to celebrate this thing you've done, but I want to dig into what is this thing that you've done, right? Like, or y'all have done, right? Obviously it's not just y'all, it's a whole,
how did you do
Wesley
this
Foundation.
thing?
How'd you do this, right? Like, how do you, and more specifically, like, how do you create this environment? Like, what are the intentional choices that y'all are making? Or even if, like, you lucked your way into them and then realized this is what's working. At least that's how my life has worked a lot. Like, what are the choices that either you made intentionally or unintentionally? And then how have you kind of invested in and maintained that culture?
Yeah, that's huge. First off, I will say a thing to shock and awe you is I am technically Gen Z as well. I am the
you're killing me.
The oldest age of it, and I thought that was I'm on the edge. They say 96 is sometimes millennial, sometimes Gen Z, but I flip flop based on what is more funny in the situation, which I think is very Gen Z coded. Anyways,
Emily's spouse Tim is the same for millennials. He might as well be a Gen Xer, but he's only 9 months older than me.
Yes. Right.
Anyways,
very much a flip-flops depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so I think sort of for me, what I've seen is the number one thing I did wasn't like, we're gonna go and reach the unchurched people. That really wasn't a thought process of ours. It was very much how do we create a community first, and from that community we make that open to anyone that wants to be a part of it, whether that is religious, not. And from there, we can ask sort of these big questions. We can explore faith such as that. And so that took a sort of lot of time. Sort of my first year was spent doing that, is sort of, and I mean, continuing to do that. It's not all the way, obviously, there now.
But
But being able to simply create a space where people feel that they are safe to come as they are, that they are known as they are, as this person, not as a, checkbox to filled off, being like, oh, we're gonna get another warm body in the church sort of thing. And a lot of that, I will say too, we start with meeting the needs of students. And so some of the biggest ways that we get students in our building as a part of our community is we do a free lunch and we run the food pantry on campus. And so we have a lot of folks who will come to these things. And one thing that we could have done is simply be like, here you go, here's a meal, here's some food, be on your way, hope your life is great. And if we would have done that, we would have missed so many chances for building that community where we can get to know folks. And so I stressed so much with not just myself, but with my interns and the other staff member that one of the things we have to do is make people feel like we care about them as a person, that this is not a transaction that we are doing. Actually, one of the, I think the guiding principles that sort of got me to this point is in my first semester at Lamar, I was in my office one day and a student comes in and he says, oh, this is my first time here at the Wesley, and I'm a little bit sort of like not sure what's all going on here. Are you like, can you talk to me? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And he says eventually, like, oh yeah, my friend told me about this pantry. They told me like this is a great place. They can come and help you out. But he said that there's a weird sort of feeling when you go in there, that it feels transactional, that we're simply trying to give them something and then get them out the door. And when I heard that, I was just... first shocked, and then second, appalled. That seems very extra. But it was very much like, this is not who I want to be. I don't simply want to shuffle people in and out, simply trying to do this thing, but have a place where people can find their home. And so I say that all to say that meeting the need and then intentionally trying to welcome people, make them feel like this is a home, a community, that is where I was able to reach people who might not have ever come inside a, traditional church any other way. If they had known I was a pastor from the, or if I went around being like, here's my sermon sort of thing, that's not going to connect with them. But because I started with this angle of friendship, of caring about them, I was able to, assuage some of those fears so that they then can deepen that relationship with us.
Well, it's a classic.
That's wonderful.
It's the classic.
I love that you're using the word home.
Yeah. That they're never going to care what you know until they know that you care, right? Like it is there was something that they taught us in ed school, right? That, the students need to learn math. That's great. And that's true. And you do need to teach them math. But generally speaking, the way students actually work, the way humans actually work, I was just learning this for K through 12 education, was, hey, humans are relational beings. We are, when I get theological, we were built by God to be in relationship with God and one another. And so that it opens with this, hey, yeah, we care about you. No strings attached. We care about you. And that creates that meaningful point of invitation. I'm then interested, kind of, how did you, what actions did you take to shift that feeling? Right. It's also like, we don't often get that really useful feedback of like, bless that student for coming in and saying, yeah, this feels really transactional. And I'm like, my God, would that all feedback was so useful. Jeez. So shout outs to that person. That's amazing. But because I think a lot of churches would say that, oh yeah, no, we welcome everyone, and we want people to come as they are, and people walk into the room and don't feel that. And so how have you helped people feel that in walking in the room?
Yeah. That's a great question, and one that I wrestle with a lot, because I think the number one thing I had to do was let my, priority tasks or the thing that look productive become less essential. So, like if I don't, respond to these emails as fast as I was, if I don't submit some paperwork that I was supposed to on time because I was, sitting with these students, that's a part of ministry. Like I intentionally make a large part of my day simply sitting and talking with people, letting them sort of hear from me, and I can listen to them. I ask them sort of questions to tell me about their life, sort of thing, so that we can form this connection. And that was one of the biggest actionable things I took is, stop being quote unquote productive in the productive sense. Like, I could get all my, this is probably not super great, but I could write my sermon, plenty in time, and I can have all these things prepped and all that sort of stuff. But I found that those were good. I enjoyed doing those things. But what really brought people back to Wesley wasn't the sermons or these little talks I was leading or this, that, or whatever. But what brought them back was that there was someone that they could go to and talk to and know that they would listen to their problems. And that is probably the biggest thing that I took that step for.
You've been so forthcoming with this idea of building community and making a home. And I love that you use the word home. I love that you are talking about building this community, building these relationships, taking the time to invest in your people. Because, for a lot of these students, and especially I imagine this is the first time they've been away from home. And so they're searching for not just a connection with the divine, which we all are, seeking to be in relationship with God and with one another. It's what we were built for. But seeking to find a home, to find a place where you belong. And that's so much of the college experience, I feel like, is discovering who you are and where you fit in. And so creating that space, it sounds like, has been really important to the success of your program. That's really wonderful. That I love that the words that you use to describe it are home and community and belonging. That's beautiful.
No, that's exactly it. I just told this story in a sermon just yesterday. We had a retreat last fall, and the theme was Sabbath. How can we take a break during the fall semester so that we can sort of rest, recover, and sort of get our wits about us as we go back to finish strong. And the last day we were sharing stories with each other, or how has this weekend been impactful to you, and what are you taking from this weekend to go back to the semester? And everyone was sort of went around, answered those questions. And one student, one of our newer freshmen, only been around for a couple months, and she said, what I'm taking from this weekend is that I'm not alone anymore. That I am not having to do college by myself anymore. She explained a bit about how it had been one of the hardest sort of, 3 months of her life, that she wasn't sure how she was going to be able to make it through all of this. But since finding a home at the Wesley, everything, the burdens seem just a little bit lighter, which isn't meant to be tooting the horn, but it's this idea of the, how can home and belonging actually contribute towards everything else. It can contribute towards the spiritual development. And so that's why I always see that it's not, even though someone might look in the doors and see me just sitting and talking with people, I see it as a vital and productive part of the ministry, because that's how you can have those deeper conversations later on, is if you can build that belonging now.
I do want to note that, that is in some ways exactly the, first century church model of, relationship development, right? What did Jesus get in trouble for? A lot of it was you're all you do is hang out with people. You don't follow the law. You just chill with people we don't like. That's if you think about in some ways this is an amazing innovative ministry, and in some ways it's an amazing innovative ministry because it gets back to the thing that theoretically we always knew long before we had buildings, long before we had massive structures and governances and polities and whatever. We just had a bunch of people traveling around chilling with other people. And sometimes wishing that they could have a little more space away from people, and sometimes just oh no, we've got to go back in, but it's a lot, you get the sense that a lot of Jesus' ministry was built on chill vibes. Like, it was just like, no, it's cool. No, chill out, man. It's all right. Like, no, I'm not going to condemn you. Like, let's talk about this. No, you should probably change your life. But like, I'm not going to like stone you for it. I'm just going to like look at you and go, no, I love you. But like, also maybe some things, they change, right? This is this model for ministry that we've had for literally 2,000 years. And it's fascinating, all the things that then other expectations we built on top of that in no way existed in the early church, because they literally couldn't. You didn't have like generation. You had no one who had been to youth group, right? There had been no youth group yet. Timothy is kind of the earliest youth group kid. Right. It's quite literally. And so like it is, I love, I always forget who said this, but like, you know, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. Like, this is the rhyming nature of Christian ministry is, in moments where we have built too much structure and formality, often it is go back to, let's be chill. Let's have chill vibes, and let's build relationships, and let's let people do the exploring rather than us do the telling. And I think that is, something that we've always had in us, and B, we're remarkably good at getting away from. But my next question is, how do you establish this as norms in a community, right? That you as leader have, you know, clearly you model it, right? You do the really important thing. You delay other tasks for the sake of the relationship side. Amen. There were, you know, yes. But how do you create the norm in your community that this is how, in this place, this is how we approach one another?
Yeah. I mean, like, that is very hard. That is one of the things that I've struggled with a bunch, because when I got there, the first 6 months, I came in and I was doing things differently than the former campus pastor. And that's not saying that my way is better or worse than anyone else's way, but it, you know, as any sort of change in church leadership happens, there's tension, there's conflict, people get mad, some people leave the ministry. And so that was a sort of a thing I had to reckon with for a little while, is there are people who don't want it to be like this. They want it to be much more similar to that sort of, you know, youth group 2.0, or the, you know, like we're copying, pasting a church into this service as well. And so had to have some folks sort of leave in order to fully get into this new model of it being first and foremost focused on the relationships. And so from there, though, it has been, I think, one of the important things is I have a lot of students who, you know, going and talking to strangers and welcoming them in, doing all that sort of stuff, that can be terrifying. Especially like if dealing with social anxiety, that is a very difficult thing to do. Me as an extrovert, that's awesome. I thrive off doing that sort of stuff. And so one of the ways that trying to instill this is have folks take small steps to doing it. I can dive in head first, but I know if the ministry is just me doing all of this, if it's just me trying to be this welcoming community, then it's going to flounder. There will be times when I'm not there. There will be times when something happens and someone else has to be there. And so what I tell students as my student leaders, the ones who have sort of bought into this mission of, okay, I know you might not be able to have this fully fleshed, gigantic relationship with this person, but like, what's to stop you from chatting with them for 5 minutes as they are coming in the building to get some coffee, sort of thing. And those baby steps I've really tried to focus on for my leaders, so that they know that they're capable of doing it, because once they do it, it's so much less scary than when you are thinking about it. And then B, getting incrementally better action, at the anticipation. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's really a combination of sort of trying to model it myself, and then also take a back seat so I can let others lead. And I just got back from Army last week, and one of the things that the big stressing for this is, you know, like, I've done these before, I could go in and like zip, zap, zop, build a ramp, and it'd be done, it would be great and wonderful. but you're taking away from students who might be for the first time learning to do this thing. And I view sort of ministry as doing the same, as it's going to be less effective than if I just did it myself in the short term. Like I could build a relationship better. I don't really like that I'm saying that, but like, you get the idea of, like I enjoy doing this. It's something I'm called to, but I believe that it being less effective and it being a training wheel sort of place for it is such an important thing for leaders to have in general. And then last thing I just thought of that as I was saying that is I try to also encourage students, like college especially is a great training ground for so many things, for being in uncomfortable spaces. It is a safe place to be uncomfortable is often what I say. And so if you can do this now by getting to push yourself, then when you get outside of college, when you get into the quote unquote, the real world, life's going to be completely different and it might not be as easy then. And so you should need to take advantage of it now.
So my next
it's
question.
It's almost like you're following
ahead,
this discipleship model. I was gonna say it's almost like you're raising up disciples, kind of like someone else we know. And so, but raising them in this idea of learning how to love others like Jesus loved us, right? Like, so I'm really curious because you are, you've talked about those who are following in your footsteps, those that are following and reaching towards your example. Are there people who have made it easier or harder for you? Because we all have people who we are discipling. We all have people who are above us who are maybe not used to that model of discipleship yet, who are telling you to maybe do things differently. Have there been supportive people from perhaps a previous generation or those in your uppers who would support you or who have done things that could support you, I guess? What is a way that you could be supported in doing that new ministry model?
Yeah. That's huge. I always tell folks that I can only do so much on campus. It really is. A good part of my job is not only the on-campus relationships, students, worship, student center, all that sort of stuff, but also the what I do with the churches nearby and with the other campus pastors at other Wesleys nearby. I very much believe that I think sort of talking about, what is a new way forward for churches is maybe we don't need to be sort of as siloed anymore as this is my thing that I'm doing. And so I reach out and I go beyond sort of denomination connections where I have a great relationship with the Episcopal Church. I'm trying to get something set up with the Presbyterian Church, trying to get a thing where that support isn't just people that have done this before. Because for a long time it was, you were in the Wesley when you were growing up, now you can support us now. But instead, a lot of churches are going through these same struggles that we are. And so we need to latch on with each other to not only, grow towards something better, but I really see that as the ideal sort of what Jesus wanted is this, we might not have, the exact same way of, worshiping or doing this, but we are united enough in mission that we can be committed to this singular cause of caring for college students. And so I don't think that actually answered your question, Emily, but that's where I took it. So
it did.
Well, to follow up on Emily's question.
It did really.
How do you okay, so let's talk about stakeholders for a second, right? So you have, as we all do, right? You have these external stakeholders that have in their mind, perhaps, a generations long expectation of what this ministry looks like. And then this ministry does not look like that. And so how do you, where have you found success in shaping these conversations with stakeholders to say, hey, this is the thing that we are doing and there's value in it? Because I think that's one of the things that often I know holds churches back is, well, in the end, I've got to fill out Form 6, and Form 6 is going to ask me about worship attendance. And if worship attendance number doesn't go up, then I'm going to be in trouble. And I think one of the skill sets that anyone trying to do a new thing, or succeeding at doing a new thing, has to master is, how do you manage those stakeholder relationships so that they see there is value inherent there, but how have you worked with your key stakeholders to help them see that value?
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. It's not what they're used to, quote unquote used to when they see church, and so it just necessitates explanation a little bit, which makes things a little bit more challenging. And so one of the big things that I have found great sort of success in, and that I think really speaks to stakeholders, is getting key, testimonies from people, less in the sense of, I gave my life to Christ because of this, but testimonies as in, like I said, this student story I told from that fall retreat, of someone that can say, because of Wesley, I was able to do this. And it might not be anything that is church related, but it is something that is the wholeness of life. They are feeling this love and connection. And that is where I see there's a real power, because people oftentimes, even if someone has not been in school a long time, if they hear like, oh, this student was struggling because they were completely alone on campus, that's a relatable story. That's something that you can tell. And I mean, those are the things that I believe people resonate with a lot more than, hey, we had 30 people in worship today. And so, it is interesting though, because I find that different people value different things. Because one of our big ministries that we have is the food pantry here on campus, and some people in some churches, and this is not a negative in any way, they view Wesley as a mission part of their church, and so one of the things that they see value in the Wesley is how many people we're serving in the food pantry. Are we increasing how many people we're serving? Are we able to do this, that, or whatever? And I always, though, when I tell them that, because I know there are certain people that these are sort of the things they want to know, include the relationship bit of, oh, we had this student this past week who came for the food pantry, but then got talking and is now showed up to our lunch later on in the week and got connected and was hanging out here at the Wesley. And trying to sort of tie together what are the expected numbers, the expected responses to how our metrics are doing, with also what I value as, I mean, honestly, the more important things. I value the, deeper sort of connections that we can get more than, how many folks we can get in a door. And so I feel like by almost meeting them where they're at. Yeah.
Well, there's a I think a valuing in the depth of relationship rather than the quantity of relationship. And that, and like we have seen, I think, for, generations, you can have churches with a lot of numbers, but how many of those people are there because they're being spiritually fed, and how many people were there because this was the respectable thing to do? This is just the thing everybody did on Sunday.
Yeah.
We have this nostalgia for full churches. But the question we've always got to go back to is, like, we had full churches in an era of nominal Christianity. What is changing isn't that people don't get depth out of church. It's that the only people in church are the people getting depth out of church. And so telling the story of that depth, I think, is a really powerful. That I want to kind of move the conversation kind of a little more big picture. As a on the cusp Gen Z who serves in ministry alongside other Gen Zs, who are not on the cusp. Like, what overall, in terms of the church's ministry, how would you think about making a church space more welcoming, more friendly to Gen Z, right? That it's not going to be like, oh, we're going to get the Gen Xers by building family life centers, and we're going to get the millennials with that contemporary worship, right? Like, I understand it's not going to look like that. There's more depth there. But like, what are those things that you sense yourself longing for in a church, and you sense in your folks longing for in a church, that a church could do to be better at opening their doors.
Yeah. I noticed in my first semester we were doing a traditional sort of, we'd have dinner and then we would do a worship service. And the worship service was very much a 3 songs, a prayer, I give a sermon. And during that time, I noticed that students weren't super engaged. They weren't really getting much out of it. You saw the glazed over eyes. You saw and I like to think that wasn't just my sermons. But I got to talking with students, and they shared with me, I don't necessarily want to just hear from you or someone else. These songs make me feel uncomfortable having to stand up if I'm not really wanting to sing. And so a lot of these things that, I grew up used to doing and I've had to sort of take a back seat because there's things that the students want instead. And so what we did was after that first semester, we switched to a dinner church sort of model where we will serve a meal, we'll have folks sit around the table, I will talk for maybe 3 or 4 minutes to sort of introduce a theme of the lunch that we're having. And then from there, the tables are free to sort of take that conversation where they want. And so I have little discussion questions that I'll write to sort of guide some things. But a lot of the times, they will take it in places that I never expected. They will ask questions that I never thought of. And I've had folks tell me that being able to talk in that way, have it be a dialogue and not a monologue, is something that they feel deepens their faith. And, it's not going to be for everyone. I understand that some people are very much wanting the, I keep on using the word traditional, not traditional in the robe sort of sense, but in the, the established church sort of thing. But I feel like for reaching people that feel left out, this is one great option, because there are going to be 1.5 million other churches that will give you your 3 songs, a prayer, and a sermon. But who is there that is going to create a space where folks can share that community and not community, but share that storytelling with folks, that they can express their own beliefs, that they can have their own doubts, they can have their questions, they can wonder aloud, I think is a really difficult thing, but a really beautiful thing to do as well. And that's not all Gen Z. There's, I could get into sort of the connections on social media and TikTok and Discord and doing online things like that. I don't have a lot of experience doing that. Social media is, I wish I was better at it, let's say. And so, but what I can say for sure is that doing things not that I'm the one that knows everything is important. It is decentralizing the church. I used the word recently, declergifying the church, in the sense of we're giving power to folks to share their own faith in where they feel comfortable at. And that lets people, I think, personally, as an external processor myself, those are the things that allow for folks to not just hear what someone's saying and be like, okay, this is what I believe now, but really to reckon with the things that are a part of their faith in their life and see how that really impacts them.
Yeah, and it goes back to, I think, one of the themes that has really become a part of this show and our work in trying to explore, like, how do we make church happen better? How do we make church happen again? Is we end up going back to our earlier principles, right? What you have just described sounds remarkably like a Wesleyan small group. Now, a Wesleyan small group reframed for the 21st century, because it is like a Wesleyan small group still operated on the, we're all Christian here, right? And that's not necessarily where we can operate from, but it is, at its core, was about people working out their own salvation in fear and trembling, right? Like actually having the opportunity in a thing called church or in a thing called small group to dig in and process collectively, but from their own soul, not just, church can often just turn into a broadcast medium, one to many, right? I, one, pour into the many. I, one full vessel, pour into the empty vessel, right? All these things that are just not true about the way God works, or necessarily true about the way that people are looking to grow in faith, or certainly the people, as you brought up, like the people who didn't connect with that model, just doing that model but cooler is probably not going to help them connect any more than they did before. They might tolerate it a little more, but that's not actually like if there are plenty of people even still today for whom the kind of broadcast model works, but that's not reaching the folks who bounced off the experience. And so I think there's real power in thinking about that frame. About a year ago now, Emily and I went to Union Coffee up in Dallas, and that's what their worship service is a little more talking, but they also sing secular songs, which is really fun. But the bulk of that time, and that was largely kind of a mixture of millennials and Gen Zs, was about a discussion. And then we would reported back about the discussion. And then I think there was just like a really closing remark, but it was this very discussion based, let's all share from our own experience. And that is also validating of a panoply of different experiences, right? I mean, there's real power in that. Thank you, Kyle, for being on the show. Is there anything you want to plug, promote? I know that funding a Wesley Foundation is a wild and woolly thing. And so is there a place you want to point folks that would be helpful?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So one of the best ways to stay connected is I do a weekly newsletter called the Wesley Update, and I will have sort of reflections on sort of the past week and what's going on in college ministry, give updates in what we're doing, as well as links to support us by whether that is, one-time donations, whether it's becoming a monthly donor. It really is a communal effort. We are sponsored by the people that support our mission. And so, but if you want to get that Wesley update, it is on our website at thewesleyfoundation.com. And then there's a little heading that says newsletter. And so you can sign up right there. And you can see old newsletters too, to see if you jive with what I'm talking about. I feel like that's very millennial coded that I just said jive. So
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Again, you're on the cusp, man. You're on the cusp. You're young enough that when I was still going to the U35 dinners, y'all mocked me for not actually, for being 35. This is, I feel it. If you want to be a part of the conversation on this show, we welcome your stories of campus ministry. We welcome your stories of making church happen. You can email us, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. If you want more of what we do here, it's Servants Now on the things. Servantsnow.org on the internet. Facebook.com/servantsnow. YouTube.com/servantsnow. And coming soon, a revitalized Instagram that will be coming. But this show is made possible by a generous innovators grant by the Texennial Conference of the United Methodist Church. If you want to support us, quite literally, comment, subscribe, share, give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of that helps what we are doing, go further and thus become more sustainable. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. And we'll see you next time.